Jacob Reed lived a life of solitude tucked away in the wide, open plains of Montana. His ranch, inherited from his father, stretched for miles, a vast, golden landscape of wheat fields and cattle pastures under an endless sky. He spent his days fixing fences, tending to his horses, and speaking only to the animals that shared his home. To outsiders, he was a mystery, the kind of man who kept to himself and didn't welcome visitors. But those who had known Jacob once, years ago, would remember a different man, one who laughed often, dreamed freely, and loved deeply. A decade earlier, Jacob had fallen hard for a woman named Sarah. She was beautiful, ambitious, and full of life. Their love had been a whirlwind, fiery and fast, passionate and wild. They made plans to build a future together, right there on the ranch. But life had other ideas. Sarah didn't take to country living the way Jacob had hoped. The silence, the dust, the isolation, it slowly ate away at her spirit. Then one day, without warning, she was gone. No letter, no goodbye. Just vanished. Her disappearance had broken something in Jacob. At first, he waited. Then he searched. Then he gave up. He never knew why she left or where she went. He only knew that the woman he had wanted to spend forever with had taken their future and disappeared without a trace. Over time, the heartbreak hardened into silence, and the man who once had so much to offer closed himself off to the world. Jacob never remarried. He never dated. His neighbors whispered about it, but he ignored them. To him, love was a risk not worth taking again. His days became repetitive chores, meals, sleep. His nights were colder, quieter. Holidays passed without fanfare. Birthdays faded into regular days. And the idea of being a father, something he had once longed for, was a dream buried beneath years of pain and dust. The ranch, though beautiful, had become more of a fortress than a home. It was a place to hide from memories, from questions, from what-ifs. Jacob had gotten used to the quiet. He preferred it that way, or so he told himself. Because deep down, in the quiet hours of the night, when the wind howled outside and the fire crackled low, Jacob would sometimes sit on his porch and wonder, what if Sarah had stayed? What if she'd had a reason for leaving? What if there was something he never knew? But he never said these things out loud. He just lived. One day at a time. That winter was colder than most. Snow covered the hills early in the season. The cattle had to be brought closer to the barn. Jacob worked harder than ever, pushing his aging body to do what needed to be done. One evening, as he returned from the far pasture, he paused on the porch, brushing snow from his hat. The wind bit through his coat, and the sky above was a blanket of gray. He went inside, lit the stove, and settled in for another long, quiet night. He had no idea that everything was about to change, because somewhere down the road, a young woman was making her way through the snow, clutching a bundled-up baby boy. To her chest, a letter tucked deep inside her coat. She was nervous, heart pounding with every step closer to the ranch. She had made a promise to someone no longer here, a woman whose final words had changed the course of many lives, and she was about to knock on Jacob Reed's door. But for now, Jacob sat in his armchair, unaware of the future walking toward him. His heart, weathered but still beating strong, had one more story left to tell. The sun had already set behind the Montana hills, leaving the sky a dim curtain of gray as snowflakes drifted lazily through the air. The wind howled low like a whisper through the pine trees lining Jacob Reed's ranch. Inside his small cabin, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Jacob sat alone, nursing a cup of black coffee, his weathered hands wrapped around the mug for warmth. He had no reason to expect company. He hadn't had any in years. Suddenly, there was a knock. At first, Jacob didn't move. He blinked, thinking it might be the wind. But the knock came again, louder this time, persistent and clear. He stood slowly, his bones aching from a day of hard labor, and walked toward the front door with a mix of caution and curiosity. Couldn't remember the last time someone had come to his door without warning. When he opened it, the sight before him stopped him cold. A young woman stood on his porch, bundled in a heavy coat, snowflakes resting in her dark hair. Her cheeks were flushed red from the cold, and in her arms was a baby wrapped in a thick blanket. The child stirred gently, his small face barely visible. The woman looked up at Jacob with nervous, searching eyes. "Are you Jacob Reed?" she asked, her voice trembling from both cold and emotion. Jacob nodded slowly, still staring at the child. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is Emily Walker," she said. "I'm Sarah's niece." The name hit him like a jolt. Sarah, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in years. A name that still lingered like a ghost in the corners of his mind. His jaw tightened. What about her? Emily looked down at the baby. "She's gone. There was an accident a few weeks ago. She didn't make it." Jacob felt the air leave his lungs. Whatever anger, pain, or longing he still held on to collapsed under the weight of that single sentence. Sarah was gone. Just like that. "I'm sorry," he muttered, voice thick. "I didn't know." Emily nodded as if she had expected his reaction. "Before she passed, she told me something. Something I think you deserve to know." She adjusted the baby gently in her arms. "This is Noah. He's your son, Jacob. Sarah told me everything before she died." Jacob's heart stopped. He stared at the baby as if he were seeing through time. 100 thoughts flooded his mind out, disbelief, hope, and a terrible ache in his chest. "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "That can't be. Sarah never told me she was pregnant. She left. She didn't say a word." "She was scared," Emily replied. "She didn't think you'd want a child. She said she didn't want to tie you down, but she always regretted it. And in her last days, she couldn't keep it a secret anymore." Jacob stepped back, struggling to breathe. I don't know what to do with this." Emily reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. She wrote, "You a letter. I brought it with me. And this," she pulled out a folded sheet of paper, "is a DNA test. I had it done after she passed. I needed to be sure before I came here." Hands shaking, Jacob took the papers but didn't open them right away. His eyes were still fixed on the baby, Noah, his son, his flesh and blood. The child looked so peaceful, unaware of the storm swirling around him. Emily took a step forward. "I can't raise him, Jacob. I'm still in college. I'm not ready for a baby. But I promised Sarah I would bring him to you. That's why I'm here." Silence fell between them. Outside, the wind blew harder, and inside, the fire popped softly. Jacob looked down at the letter in his hand, Sarah's final words. Guilt clawed at his heart, but alongside it, a strange warmth began to bloom. Noah, his son. A piece of Sarah he didn't know he had. A second chance he never thought would come. He looked back at Emily, his voice raw and uncertain. "Come inside." And with that, the door opened not just to his home, but to a future Jacob never saw coming. Jacob Reed's cabin, once cold and quiet, now echoed with unfamiliar sounds, soft baby cries in the middle of the night, tiny feet kicking against blankets, the creak of the rocking chair as he tried to soothe his newborn son to sleep. It had only been a few days since Emily had knocked on his door and changed everything, but Jacob already felt like he was living a new life, one that was confusing, overwhelming, and yet strangely hopeful. Fatherhood didn't come naturally to Jacob. He had spent so many years alone, his world ordered and predictable. Now everything was upside down. Diapers, bottles, nap times, it was a language he didn't speak. At first, he fumbled constantly. The first time Noah wouldn't stop crying, Jacob panicked, pacing the room with the baby in his arms, begging him to settle down. The first diaper change was a disaster, and the bottle always seemed too cold or too warm. But Emily helped. Though she'd insisted she couldn't stay long, she had classes to return to and a life of her own, she remained for a few days to help Jacob adjust. She showed him how to burp Noah after feeding, how to hold him when he had gas, how to warm formula the right way. She was patient, kind, and encouraging, even when Jacob's hands trembled or when he muttered frustrated curses under his breath. Despite their age difference and different worlds, they began to understand each other. Emily also told him more about Sarah, how she'd raised Noah as a single mother, always keeping Jacob's name a secret until the very end. She'd spoken of Jacob often, Emily said, with regret, with love, with longing. She'd always hoped he might somehow meet his son one day. And now, through tragedy, that wish had come true. Jacob started spending more time holding Noah, memorizing the soft curve of his cheeks, the way his tiny hand gripped one of Jacob's fingers. Some days he sat on the porch with the baby asleep on his chest, staring out over the land with a feeling he hadn't known in years. Purpose. But it wasn't easy. Doubt crept in during quiet moments. Jacob questioned everything: his past, his worth, his ability to be a good father. What if he messed up? What if he couldn't give Noah what he needed? He was a cowboy, not a caretaker. He didn't know lullabies or how to teach a child to read. What if Noah grew up resenting him? What if deep down he just wasn't enough? The ranch hands and neighbors were no help. Word traveled fast in small towns. Some were supportive, but others whispered behind his back, wondering if Jacob was too old or too closed off to be a father. A few even suggested the child might not be his. Emily defended him fiercely when she heard the talk. "You're doing the best anyone could," she told him one night, when she found him staring blankly at the fireplace, lost in his thoughts. "And Noah already knows you're his. He doesn't need perfection. He just needs you." Her words struck something deep in Jacob. He realized that love wasn't about getting everything right. It was about showing up every day, even when it was hard. And he had already lost too many chances in life to waste this one. But the turning point came one stormy evening. Noah developed a sudden fever. His small body burned hot, and he cried nonstop. Panic took over Jacob. He didn't know what to do. The thermometer didn't work, the baby's formula was untouched, and his cries only grew louder. Jacob felt helpless, watching his son's chest rise and fall with labored breaths. Emily took charge, calmly calling the nearest clinic, bundling the baby up and riding with Jacob through the snow-covered roads. At the clinic, they were told it was just a bad cold and that Noah would recover. But for Jacob, that moment was life-altering. He realized how much he needed Noah and how much he needed someone like Emily, someone who had walked into his life without warning but had already changed it forever. When they returned to the ranch that night, Noah finally asleep, Jacob turned to Emily. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said. She smiled, tired but sincere. "You'll learn. You already are." And in that moment, something shifted. Jacob wasn't just trying to survive fatherhood anymore. He was ready to embrace it, not because he was perfect, but because he was willing to try with his whole heart. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and with the melting snow came the quiet blossoming of something new, not just in the land, but in Jacob Reed's heart. Days grew longer, and so did the bond between him and Noah. The man who once feared fatherhood now couldn't imagine a single day without the little boy's giggles, cries, or sleepy weight resting against his shoulder. Jacob's transformation wasn't sudden, it was built moment by moment. He learned to warm bottles with one hand and rock Noah to sleep with the other. He memorized the different meanings behind each cry: hunger, discomfort, or just needing to be held. The ranch, once a place of solitude, now echoed with new life soft coos, baby babble, and Jacob's deep voice singing lullabies he never knew he remembered. There was laughter again, and warmth, even in the corners that had long gone cold. But the outside world soon came knocking. Jacob had to prove that he had the right to raise Noah legally. Despite the DNA test and Emily's testimony, Child Welfare Services required formal action. A caseworker was assigned to evaluate Jacob's home, lifestyle, and ability to care for an infant. The process was invasive and nerve-wracking. Every detail from the state of Noah's crib to the type of baby food in the kitchen was scrutinized. Jacob, though nervous, didn't flinch. He cooperated with quiet determination. He wasn't just fighting for custody, he was fighting for the right to finally be the father he'd never been given the chance to be. Emily remained by his side throughout. Though she had meant to stay only for a few days, she delayed her return to college indefinitely. She helped with appointments, legal documents, and keeping Noah on schedule. More than that, she brought lightness into the home-teasing Jacob when he got baby food on his shirt, helping him laugh off his mistakes and reminding him he wasn't alone. Somewhere along the way, Jacob began to look at Emily differently, not as Sarah's niece or simply Noah's temporary caretaker, but as someone who had unexpectedly become part of his life and perhaps his heart. She had stepped into his world at its most vulnerable point and never once backed away. She wasn't just helping him raise a child, she was helping him rediscover himself. One evening, after the custody hearing concluded in his favor, Jacob returned home with Noah sleeping soundly in his car seat. Emily was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed, worry still written on her face. "Well?" she asked, voice tight with hope. Jacob smiled, something he now did more freely. "It's done. He's officially mine." Tears sprang to her eyes, and before she could stop herself, she hugged him tightly. He held her there for a long time, the baby still asleep between them in the quiet dusk. The next few days brought a sense of peace Jacob hadn't felt in years. The legal storm had passed, and he could finally breathe. He spent mornings on the porch with Noah in his lap, watching the sun rise over the hills. The ranch no longer felt like a prison of memory, it felt like a home. And then came the question that had lingered in his mind for weeks. Would Emily stay? He found her one afternoon in the barn, rocking Noah in her arms. Her eyes were tired but content, her hair messy from chasing the baby around all morning. She looked like she belonged not just on the ranch, but with them. "Emily," Jacob said gently, "you've done more for us than I ever could have asked. I don't want to stand in the way of your life, but I was wondering, hoping you'd consider staying." She looked up, surprised, searching his eyes. "Are you asking me to stay for Noah?" "I'm asking you to stay for us," he said quietly. "For me. For this life we've somehow built. I know it wasn't planned, and I know it's not perfect. But it's real. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't want you to be part of it." Emily smiled, tears welling again. She looked down at Noah and kissed his forehead. "You two are already my family, I think. I knew that the night I knocked on your door." Weeks passed, then months. Their small home grew warmer with every passing day. Jacob, Emily, and Noah settled into a rhythm, a life of unexpected joy built on second chances. What began with heartbreak and uncertainty became a story of healing, hope, and new beginnings. One morning, as the sun rose over the ranch, a knock came again at the front door, but this time it was Emily returning from town, a smile on her face, Noah giggling in her arms. And Jacob stood in the doorway, not as a man haunted by the past, but as a father, a partner, and finally, at peace.